No matter how much money I was making, it felt like I had to make more though. I was miserable. I was crying all the time. I was so stressed. My job felt like a toxic relationship. They kept telling me I was good enough to do the job, but not good enough for the raise.
Making $200,000 a year, being able to take a full year off, finding your passion, and still not quite feeling like you've made it. That's part of Alyssa Meza's story. Alyssa grew up facing evictions, built a career as a brand marketer, and when she reached the top of the corporate ladder, realized success didn't feel the way she imagined. She's wrestled with poverty PTSD and is now on a mission to redefine success, security, and how to build a life you love.
And then within 2 years, I tripled that. I love salary transparency. I think it's very important. I'm also someone who loves to negotiate. And I promise you, I probably made more money than I should have, but that was mostly because I negotiated. I realized that money bought security, but it didn't buy my happiness. I started to put my mental health over my bank account. It gave me the opportunity to reevaluate how I wanted to spend the rest of my life and if money was going to rule the rest of my life.
Hi, Alyssa. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. This is like one of my favorite subjects, so I'm so happy to talk about it.
Amazing. Love to hear that. So starting out, what are you doing? What do you do for work right now?
Yeah, so I'm a brand marketer. I do pretty much anything that involves social media marketing, influencer marketing, life cycle marketing, anything brand facing, like outward facing. I usually am working on. So I do a little bit of everything. I have multiple streams of income because I can't sit still, and some would call me a workaholic, unfortunately. But I do, I work for a finance company, and then I also work for a celebrity doing his social, and then I also work as a script writer for another creator, and then I do my own brand stuff too. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
How did you get into this?
Oh gosh. Honestly, I dropped out of college. College wasn't for me. It was so expensive, and I think I just couldn't see myself doing something that I absolutely loved while I was in college. And so I actually dropped out to work for a nonprofit.
Okay.
And this nonprofit I worked for was called Invisible Children. And that might be a throwback, or I might be showing my age actually as I talk about this. So I worked on a campaign called Coney 2012. And that was one of the first viral social media campaigns. And after that, I just fell in love with digital storytelling. I fell in love with what social media could be. Because at the time it was very much like posting pictures of your food and using some really bad filters.
Right.
And I think I just saw how much you can tell a story through social. And I just loved that. I loved storytelling, and I just kind of fell into it. So since then I worked for nonprofits, social enterprises, CPG companies, all mission-based. Very proud of that. Every company I've worked for has been very mission-driven. And it was just something, like I said, I fell into it and, happened to work on the social campaign. So I was like, oh, I guess I love social media. And here we are now. I think that, oh gosh, that was 13 years ago. Yeah, it's been a while.
I actually started the first Invisible Children chapter at my high school.
Wait, I love that.
So I started that in like 2009.
Oh my goodness.
And was doing work with Invisible Children. I did the thing where they came to the school and did all of that. And this is so funny that this is kind of how we both got our start.
Yes.
I mean, really, because I remember seeing their first video and being like, wow, this is the power of video and the power of digital and the power of storytelling.
The idea was to bring awareness to an ongoing silent war that was happening in northern Uganda. And in this war, there were children being abducted and forced to fight in these child armies. And these kids were forced to do horrific things. And Coney 2012 was first of its kind because typically what they would do is they'd create these beautiful documentaries that shine light on the whole issue and bring it to the forefront. But they would tour the video. So they would go to schools, they would go to churches, they would go to conferences, and that's how we would get the word out there. And because social media was a new thing, we were like, well, what's going to happen if we put it on YouTube? And we put it on YouTube, and it just skyrocketed.
You cannot dispute that it set the stage for the viral social campaigns we've seen ever since.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
For different reasons. Like some, I would say, are commercial, some are nonprofit, but this really set the stage for the blueprint of what we see for social media today.
Absolutely.
So you're in college when you drop out to work with Invisible Children. What was the path leading up to even going to college and then the decision to drop out?
Yeah, so college was something no one in my family had done. My grandma came from the Philippines, and so she actually did go to like business school, and then she did nursing and all the things. Um, but I came from a family of immigrants. My mom had me when she was incredibly young. So she was 17 when she had my older sister, 19 when she had me. So she was a baby herself. And so college wasn't an option for her. She chose to raise us instead.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, I was always told college was an option. I was always told you should go to college. I was never told how I was going to pay for college. Like no one ever talked about that part. And so when the time came to actually, apply for college and start taking out loans and all the things, that was just not something my family could afford.
Yeah.
And so it became something that I would have to take on. I remember I couldn't do a the FAFSA. FAFSA, is that what it's
FAFSA.
called? Yeah, I couldn't qualify for some reason. And so I had to get a private loan. So obviously that interest rate was absolutely insane.
Mhm.
And my grandma had to co-sign. And my grandma, like I said, she's an immigrant from the Philippines. And she always believed we should go to college because that's why she came to America.
Mhm.
The American dream was to give us a better life and to let her family kind of do all the things she didn't do. And so she co-signed my loan. And I just remember feeling all this pressure. Like I had to make sure that this college I was going to was the right college. I was picking a job or a career that I would definitely have a job after college once I graduated, all these things. And then I started to think about it and I was like, am I only in college because I feel like I have to be in college or because my friends were going to this college? We all went to the same college. I went
Mhm.
to a small private school. I was the scholarship student.
Where'd you go?
It was called it's called Lodi Academy. And it was my dream to go there since I was a
Yeah.
kid because all of the cool kids at my church went to that
Okay.
high school. And I so badly wanted to go there. It was so expensive. Once again, my grandma put part of the bill and then the rest was either scholarship or I worked at the school to pay for
Mhm.
my bill. And all the kids in my school basically went to this college. It was kind of like the sister college of the school. So I almost felt like I had to. Like, oh, I would seem poor or I wouldn't seem good enough if I didn't go to this college. And so that was the whole reason why I went. And while I was at college and I was in it, I was like, I don't even like this. And I took up theater and fell in love with acting. And I was like, do you need a college degree to act? And so I started to consider that. There were so many different avenues I considered in my first year of college. And then when I decided to drop out, it was honestly because I wanted to work for Invisible Children. And it was, as a full semester. And when I told my mom I was dropping out of college to work for a nonprofit, she was not surprised.
Mhm.
She knew college wasn't really my thing. And she was like, no matter what you do, you're going to land on your feet. And that's kind of been my mom's
Wow.
support throughout my whole life. And I think that's why I've been able to kind of take risks and do what I want and just anticipate being okay because my mom always said, you'll always land on your feet. And so, you know, the career journey that I've taken is not normal at all. And I'm not saying you should drop out of college. College is right for, some students and certain types of people. But I do think there are people who don't necessarily need college to thrive and to do well. And I think some people, sometimes that is frowned upon because people are like, no, you need a college degree to like do well in life. And I mean, I don't. And I feel like I'm doing okay.
This
So,
is not the first time on this podcast
Yes.
that I will say the way that we view college needs to change. Not everyone needs to go to a 4-year university.
mhm.
Not everyone needs to go at 17 or 18 years old. Over time, we're seeing that not only will a college degree not guarantee anything or the same that it used to,
Mhm.
but a lot of people actually get held back by going to college.
Oh,
I think you would probably say
absolutely.
that, right? If you hadn't dropped out.
Oh, if I did it, dropping out was the best thing I could have done for
Yeah.
myself. I think I considered going back after Invisible Children. I considered going back to college, and then I thought I have the life experience at this point, and going back to college just felt like a waste of time to me. Just in that period
Yeah.
of my life, just because I was like, I've seen it all, I've done it all. Like, I mean, we all think that when we're early 20s, right? But I truly felt like where I was in life, it made sense for me to just not go back to college. And I didn't have to. Like the moment I told people I worked at Invisible Children, because it was obviously such a groundbreaking social campaign, they were like, do you want to work for us? And
Yeah.
so it was very easy for me to get a job. I didn't have to stress about what was next or, oh no, they have a college degree required. Like that wasn't necessarily an issue.
Has not having a college degree hindered you in any way from getting jobs?
I don't think so. I mean, I think everything happens for a reason. So I'm sure there are jobs that I applied for where they didn't even bat an eye at my resume because I didn't have a college degree on there. But that just means it wasn't meant to be. But honestly, I don't think I've necessarily ever felt. I mean, there's definitely times I felt like I wasn't good enough or I was as prepared as someone else because they had a college degree, just because I think that's what comes with a degree is like the status. And, you just have this image of someone who is like, oh, prim and proper comes to mind, but that's not necessarily a thing. But it's like they're more grounded or they have, they're more knowledgeable and all these things. I don't think that necessarily played a role in whether or not I got a job, just because I think I had a lot of experience on my resume from a young age. And so that experience kind of spoke for itself versus I have a 4-year degree, but nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Surely there's other people who think that too. So I never really struggled without a college degree, but I think it definitely played a role in whether or not I felt, I don't want to say adequate, but whether or not I felt like I was on the same level as someone. Because it does feel like sometimes when I do talk about it, before at least when I was younger, I felt a little ashamed that I didn't finish college or that I was a college dropout. But now I wear it like a badge of honor. And I'm like, see, I didn't need a college degree.
Yeah. I mean, you forged your own path.
Yes.
I had a bug in my ear after I graduated from college. I had a lot of people telling me I should go to grad school after I graduated college. And I was working in social media. And I just remember thinking, like, I am in grad school.
Yeah.
Like, just like by working in social media, I'm learning
Absolutely.
it. I just remember thinking, if I was in a classroom and not using these platforms every single day, I'm falling behind.
Yep.
Not only am I not like progressing, I'm falling behind.
Yes.
So I think there is something specific. Like I know for some career paths, like you literally have a requirement to go to school, but especially for brand marketing and social media, it actually makes the most sense to be in the field.
Thick of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So growing up, what was your relationship to money like?
Oof. This is something that I talk about often.
Yeah.
Especially like on my personal platform. I like to advocate for poverty PTSD because growing up, I grew up pretty poor. We grew up on welfare. I had a single mom. She was doing her best. She had me and my older sister, and she was young. And, life happens. And she wanted to do it on her own, which I admire. But that did come with us, sometimes we were getting evicted from apartments. Sometimes my only meal would be at school, and so we didn't have much at all. And I think poverty PTSD is something that I like to talk about because it still shows up no matter how much therapy I've done. It still shows up because my relationship with money was formed at such a young age. There are some kids who never knew about finances or didn't have to know about finances, and that was such a privilege. For me, I was always aware of our financial situation. I was always aware that we didn't have food in the fridge, or that we had to go to the food bank to get more food that day, or we had to pay with food stamps. Like I was always aware of my financial situation. And like I said, that's a privilege for people to not have to understand or to know at a young age. But for me, it's what my relationship with money was built on.
Yeah.
And so now when I look at it, you see it's very interesting because I feel like it shows up in small ways. Like now, but when my boyfriend moved in, he was like, this pantry is filled to the brim. And it's because I didn't grow up with a pantry filled to the brim. And so for me, that's success. For me, that's how I prove to myself that I've made it. Like I can afford groceries. I can afford food on my own. I can do it all on my own. And so my relationship with money can be very tricky. It's something that I think I have to check in on regularly, because sometimes I ask myself, am I doing this to heal my inner child? Or am I doing this because I genuinely want to do this?
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that money bleeds into every aspect of their lives. Some people are, like I said, privileged that they don't have to. You know, their parents pay for certain things, or, you know, it just has always come very easy to them. And God, I wish I had generational wealth. So, like, people hate on Nepo babies, but I'm like, if you were in that situation, you would take advantage. So, there's just little things where I think my relationship with money and how it bleeds into every aspect of my life really show up. And it's something I'm working on, but it's also something that I'm very vocal about, because I think that's how I heal, and that's how I address it, is by talking about it.
Thank you for sharing. I think that is really helpful to hear. And when you say money bleeds into every aspect of your life, that was one of the reasons we want to start this podcast, because money affects everything. And it connects all of us in a way, because money is how you're able to do things. And there's so many trade-offs with money as well. And even when you say they bleed into things, like, something is, this isn't simple because traveling is a privilege as well, but what flight am I going to take? When you're money conscious, okay, we'll save the $35 to take the worst flight. We're making trade-offs all day. When you're talking about the pantry, do you do the thing where you're scared of things running out, so you'll buy it before something runs out? Yeah, I talk to my brother about this all the time. This is like my husband. He's like, "Why do we have this thing? It doesn't run out." And I'm like, "But what if it runs out? It's gonna run out. We have to like." And I can relate in some way of now being in a different financial situation than I was, and having those creep up sometimes.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they don't make sense.
No, not at all. Like, for example, going to a restaurant and not having a great experience, because I don't necessarily drink a ton. And so I was a server. I get it. I had a server come up to the table. We said no on the alcohol, and you kind of immediately see the look on her face, which is like, oh, this is going to be a small tab. Like, not great. And I'm like triggered. I'm like, no, I have to prove to her that I could afford it. I just don't want to afford it right now. Like, it's just not something I need. And so I'll leave a big tip. And my boyfriend's like, help me understand this. And I was like, I want her to know that I can afford it, but I'm just choosing not to. And he's like, I don't know if I understand where you're coming from. And I was like, yeah, it's just because I've been considered like the poor one of the group, or I was a scholarship kid in high school. Like, I always was less than. Like, it always felt, and that's what money does, right? Money is a status symbol. And growing up with very little, you felt less than everyone. You felt like you couldn't join in on certain things. You couldn't wear the nicest things.
Yeah.
And, you know, in those formative years, it like sticks with you.
Right.
And yeah, it just creeps in like the weirdest ways. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm leaving her a 50% tip. I just want her to know that I can afford it.
Right. Well, before we came on the mic, we were talking about getting rid of clothes before our significant others moved in. And yeah, I got rid of like 16 bags of clothes before my husband moved in.
Like, how does it happen? I don't know.
And I was telling him, I was like, well, when I was a kid, I would get made fun of for wearing the same thing over and over again. So now I have to show everyone that I can wear a different outfit every day. And he was like, oh, as we're like hauling things off.
Right? Yeah.
He was like, that's good to know. Let's get these out of here.
Exactly.
But it does creep up in a lot of ways. Can you define poverty PTSD? Because I actually had not heard that term used before.
I know. I feel like I should coin this.
You should. Get the trademark.
I know. To me, poverty PTSD is kind of these like mini flashbacks that you get when you're put in a financial situation, whether it's you're paying, your friends are paying, you're with a group of friends on like a vacation. Like, sometimes that poverty PTSD trickles in, and suddenly you feel like you have to show up and show out. Like, you have to prove to everyone that you belong there. And poverty PTSD looks so different to me in like different ways, because it also shows up when, do you remember there was like a fruit roll-up challenge on TikTok?
I actually do remember this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was triggering for me. Again, so weird how it just like creeps in. But I remember fruit roll-ups were something that we would get at the food banks. And so when I see things that we got for free that I would get excited about as a kid, because I'm like, oh, I see all my friends at school have this. Now it's at the food bank, and like now I could bring it for my lunch. And, seeing all these people eat it on TikTok, for some reason that was triggering for me. Like that, like going to the store and seeing like it sold out and like all these things, even walking down a store aisle and seeing things that I saw that we would get at food banks, that would trigger me. And suddenly I would feel, it would take me back to this place of when I was living in poverty. And so I think poverty PTSD for me is just like those small moments that like really bring you back to being that child or that experience where you felt less than. And that happened to me a lot as a kid. And so it tends to creep up more than I would like. But it does happen.
So can you take us through from 2012 or when did you leave Invisible Children?
2012.
2012.
That
Okay.
was my last year.
Can you take us through from 2012 through 2024?
This is like how I act in an interview. I'm like, let me give you my whole life story.
Yeah.
So 2012, like I said, after working for Invisible Children, I didn't really need anything else on my resume. People knew exactly who they were. So I started working for social enterprises, companies with missions. I worked for a company called the Giving Keys that employed people transitioning out of homelessness. And that was something I absolutely loved. And that was actually my last job before leaving LA. And I loved that job. And wasn't making a ton, but I could afford to live in LA.
Yeah.
I just, Nashville was calling my name. So I moved to Nashville without a job, with literally just enough to pay this month and last month's rent. Like that was absolutely it. And so I started a bakery, as one does.
Wow.
And so while I was in Nashville, because I didn't have a job, I was like, oh, well, I like to bake. And I started posting about it on my Instagram stories. And I had a girlfriend she owns a jewelry company in Nashville. And she was like, hey, I'm actually, hosting this event. Would you want to bake for this event? Like, I see you've been baking a lot. And I was like, yes, I would love to bake. So I baked for her event. There happened to be a guy there who worked for a coffee shop. And he asked me if I was interested in wholesaling. And I was like, absolutely. And I ran home and Googled how to wholesale baked goods and also how to start a bakery.
Yeah.
Because I was just baking for fun at that point. And suddenly I was a bakery owner. I got my LLC. I got all the permits to bake out of my home. And I started baking for these coffee shops. And suddenly I was baking for 6 coffee shops.
Wow.
And it just, again, Nashville is just, old Nashville was very, welcoming of mom and pa and like small businesses and all these things. And so I never even had to market. Like I had an Instagram that was like did pretty well, but I never had to put out ads. It was all word of mouth. I was doing weddings on the weekends. I was, hiring bakers to help me bake. I got a cloud kitchen to start baking out of cloud kitchens. And so it just really blew up. And that's when I learned when your passion has to pay the bills, it's no longer your passion. And that I really struggled with because I loved baking. It was therapy for me. I actually started it when I was at Invisible Children. And that was therapy for me. And now it was a stressor. Like I had to bake in order to make X amount of money. Or, as a business owner, you have to be able to bake X amount of things so you could pay your employees. And there was just all this pressure. And so I ended up putting the bakery on the back burner because one, I missed working for someone else and them paying me.
Yes.
And then 2, I also just missed being in the trenches with other people and I missed marketing. I have always loved, again, digital storytelling. And so I started working for companies like Lyft on their social and then went to Smile Direct Club and, was making a decent amount at Smile Direct Club. I think it was like at the time, maybe like 60, like somewhere in the 60 range. And as a single girl living in Nashville, that was great. Like I survived, like it was fine. But I did want to grow. Like I wanted to move up the ladder and I was in a position where I felt like I was doing like senior manager stuff, but I was never considered as a senior manager. I was never considered for that role. And so I was like, okay, that's it. Like I need to find something else.
Yeah.
And then I fell into FinTech, and FinTech is where I just like advocated for myself because I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot for the stars. Like the worst thing they could say is no. And that's when my salary started to triple. I was making great money. I was just living my best life. I was like, this is wonderful. I like climbed the corporate ladder. And then I wanted to immediately climb down because I was like, this is not for me. I have the money and I have the funds, but I wasn't having fun. Like,
Yeah.
I was miserable. I was crying all the time. I was so stressed. I think in every one-on-one with my manager, I was like crying, and they say not to cry in front of your manager, but I was just that stressed and overwhelmed, and I didn't feel like I was good enough for the role. And there were all these things. No matter how much money I was making, it felt like I had to make more though. And so I had to stick it out.
How much money were you making in 2023?
In 2023, I think when I was doing my taxes, it ended up being like $240,000.
Wow.
And that included just some freelance work that I was doing on the side because, again, there was never enough money. And that has also led me into being a workaholic, which I do not recommend. But it's also just how I function and again, how I heal that inner child in me. But yeah, it didn't feel like enough. Like, it felt like I needed more. And then I started to really, I was working for a finance company at the time, and which is like the best thing to ever happen to me is getting into FinTech, because I love talking about money. And like I said, it's how I heal. And I remember, does money buy happiness is always a question, right? Like, that is just the age-old question. And I remember asking myself, do I think money buys happiness? And I think I just I sat with it for a little bit, because that answer has always changed for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's changed in every season I've been in. And in that exact season, I realized that money bought security, but it didn't buy my happiness. Because yes, I felt secure because I was making money. I didn't have to wonder if I could afford food or if my pantry was going to be filled enough. Like, that was all taken care of. But I was so unhappy, and I was so, like, my mental health was just not in a good place. And I think because of that, I decided to just quit. Like, I was like, I'm done. I don't think I could do this anymore. I think I did the company a favor. They did not need me on there. I just, like, my mind was not in it. My heart wasn't in it. And I decided to just take a year off. So I went from making the most money I've ever made to just completely quitting and having no backup plan besides living off my savings. And I kind of anticipated that. So for the last 6 months, I took freelance gigs. I was working really, really hard. And the goal was to live off of my savings, to take a year off, to just, like, figure out what I wanted from life, who I was. The burnout was real. And I just wanted to travel. And my friend called it my year of yes. And she was like, you're going to say yes to every opportunity you get that isn't work related. And I was like, that sounds so exciting. And I think when I quit my highest paying job ever and giving up those freelance gigs and walking away from $240,000 that year, the next year I went into, I think I made like $46,000. Like, it wasn't from freelance.
Freelance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even though I said I wasn't going to work, I ended up working. But I posted a TikTok about this, and people were like, wait, you went from 240,000 to 46,000? Like, holy salary drop. Like, why would you do that? Yeah. And I had to remind people, I was like, that was on purpose. I was like, I started to put my mental health over my bank account.
Right.
And that was a game changer for me, because I think I needed it. Because I think I felt really lost, and I almost had like this resentment towards money, because I was like, why am I so fixated on making the most money that I could possibly make while burning myself out? And I was like, at what cost? Like, I didn't know, like, make it make sense. So that I really struggled with that for a long time.
Was it triggering to get those comments that were like, why are you making $46,000?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm also someone who, again, I think this comes from my childhood, but I'm someone who I find my identity in my job. And so when people see that, I went from 240,000 to 46,000, I'm assuming that they automatically think I got fired, or I, failed at something, or I wasn't good enough at something. And that is triggering, because, again, that was my identity, was proving to people as I climbed that corporate ladder that I could do it. So that was really hard for me. And then there were also people in the comment section who totally understood where I was coming from. Like, I think my caption was like, guess which year I was the happiest? Because it was like from 2016 to 2024, my salary, because I love salary transparency. I think it's very important. Always negotiate. And I remember just reading the comments, and there were people who were like, I bet your happiest year was 2024 when you made the least. And sure enough, it was. I learned the most. I grew the most. And I think it gave me the opportunity to reevaluate how I wanted to spend the rest of my life and if money was going to rule the rest of my life.
Yeah. What were you, so in 2024, you were freelancing, but how much were you working?
Yeah. So I wasn't supposed to work at all. So like I said, I built up my savings to a point where I was like, this is like a year's worth of salary. Like, I'll be okay. Like, this is good. And I was like, no work. I'm not going to stress. I'm just going to live life and travel. And then I had a girlfriend call, and she was like, did I see that you quit your job? And then I was like, you did? And she was like, well, I've been wanting you to join my team for a long time. And she owns a social media production company. And she was like, are you open to taking freelance gigs? Like, where's your head at? And I was like, well, it's been a whole month since I've worked, so I guess I'm open to it.
Yeah.
And she was like, would you want to go to the Super Bowl and help me get content at Snoop and Dr. Dre's Super Bowl after party? And I was like, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, I will dust it off and just get right back in it. And that is kind of what got me back into working into freelance. And then she had, some other gigs. I was doing social for The Masked Singer and Farmer Wants a Wife, like these reality television shows, things I would have never done before if I didn't, I guess, leave the doors open. And doing freelance, even though I wasn't making nearly what I was making before, I just fell in love with social media again.
I mean, these opportunities sound really cool.
Once in a lifetime opportunities. Like, gave Usher a hug, just kind of caressed his abs a little bit. Like, it was just cream of the crop. I was living my best life, and not having to worry about a paycheck was the best feeling.
How did it feel to be able to say I saved up 1 year's salary?
It still didn't feel like enough. And again, I think that goes back to that poverty PTSD, that wondering of like, well, what if I spend it all? Like, how am I going to replenish it? Or will I be able to get a job after I quit? And, all of those questions. So I didn't sulk in it. Like, I didn't just bask in the beauty of being able to say I could live off of my savings account. And I look back at it now and I'm like, girl, you had it good. Like, why did you not just take it in? And again, it's because that's my poverty mindset is, will I run out of money? Great, I have all this money now, but what happens in a couple months? And honestly, it was nice to be able to quit and not have to worry about it, but I think I'll always worry about it. Like, money is just something that's always lingering in the back of my mind. Will I have enough? Do I have enough? Should I work here because I can make more money there? And maybe I'll be unhappy for a year, but maybe it'll be worth it. And so even though I had all that money saved up, it didn't feel like an accomplishment because I knew what I was going to spend it on. Like, I had it pre-spent in my head. And then just, the worry of, if I spend it all, what will happen next? So even though I took that year off with the anticipation of spending that whole savings account, I didn't even let myself spend that whole savings account. Like, I still was taking small gigs to make sure it was, equaling out. I was, still skimping out on certain things so I could still save, and so I wasn't just, going like off the rails, spending all this money. I was still being very intentional about it. But I don't think it ever crossed my mind as an accomplishment. It was just more of like, I have to do this for my sanity.
You wanted to do this for a year. What were you hoping to get at the end of the year? Or like, what were you hoping to feel or do? Or what were you thinking?
I think I just wanted to be happy. And at the time, money wasn't making me happy. It was kind of like my downfall at that point, just because I'd peaked. I'd made the most money that I've ever made. And I was so sad. And I just was burnt out. And I was in a relationship and that suffered because I was so burnt out and I was so tired and I was just struggling. And there were so many, again, it bled into every aspect of my life. And so even though I was making great money, it still had a negative impact. And I think for 2024 being my year of yes, I just really wanted to experience things that I never thought I would experience. Like, I just didn't want to have guardrails. I didn't want to have to say no to something because of something else, or, because I had a job, or, I just wanted to be open to the world. And I think I just wanted to find happiness again. And that was something I was missing for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
Oh gosh. So I went back to corporate. So I think it's really easy for me to talk this big talk about like I was burnt out, but sure enough, to replenish that savings account. I call 2024 my micro retirement. And I think it's necessary for a lot of us to do that, to kind of just like save up as much as you can, take a year off. I know it's very privileged privilege of me to say, because the industry right now, it's so hard to get a job. And that I did not anticipate. I still do freelance as well. Like I mentioned, I do some random gigs, like the most random things. But again, and everyone's like, why? You make enough. And I'm like, it just doesn't feel like enough. And so I also, like I said, those micro retirements, I want to be able to do that like every 4 to 5 years, just because I think it's better for my mental health. I feel, and when I come back, I also feel completely rejuvenated. Like I'm inspired. I'm excited again. I want to be there versus I feel like I have to be there. So now I work for a FinTech that I absolutely believe in. It's a beautiful company and the mission is wonderful, but I do have those side hustles of, running social or helping out social for a random celebrity and being a script writer. And I help a girlfriend of mine from my hometown do her social. It's just the most random gigs where I don't need them, but I feel like I do. And again, it's just to help replenish that savings account so I can do my micro retirement in 4 years.
How much are you making now with all of these gigs?
I'll probably make a little over $200,000.
Amazing.
I talk about money a lot. I talk a lot about growing up poor. And I also think about how that might make my mom feel because, she was the provider. And sometimes that hinders me from wanting to talk about it or have that conversation.
Yeah.
But my mom could not be more supportive.
Yeah.
I think my mom is a mom who recognizes that what she did and the things that she had to do, they played a role in our lives. And that's just matter of fact.
Yeah.
There's no changing the past. There's no rewriting history. And I respect that so much about her. And I think sometimes when, I told her I was coming on here and she was so excited. She was like, of course you are. Like, she is not surprised. But I think that says so much about her support is because, like I said, she, from day one, has always said, she calls me Saw. That's my nickname. She's like, Saw, you'll always land on your feet. And so when I tell her about these opportunities or, these cool things that come up, mostly because of TikTok, she is just like, of course you're doing that. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And so she's super supportive. And so is the rest of my family. I think sometimes it can be a little tricky. I think when you get to a place where, and I think this was something I had to navigate. It took me a while to learn how to navigate because, when you start making more money than your parents, or you start to wonder if you're making more money than your parents, you don't want to talk about it too much. Like, you don't want to rub it in their face. You don't want them to feel less than in any way. But I'm also someone who loves to negotiate. And I promise you, I probably made more money than I should have, but that was mostly because I negotiated. And so I usually take a lot of pride in that. But, being around my family, sometimes I feel guilty. Like, there is that guilt and shame that I kind of carry of like this pretentious, like, oh, I make so much money. Like, that is not why I do it. And that's also why I started like a family fund. So if they ever needed help or, I want to be that. And that also is just a cultural thing. Like, as a Filipino, and growing up in the Filipino culture, like, my grandma was always sending boxes of clothes and food and all the things to her families who had less than in the Philippines. And so for me, that was just, I wanted to make a lot of money so I can give my family the life that they couldn't have and didn't have. And so I like to spoil my mom. We'll go on vacations together and I'll do what I can for her because I want her to know how valued and appreciated she is. And, this trauma isn't necessarily because of her. I mean, sure, it was because of things that her actions and situations we were put in. But I know if it was up to her, that wouldn't be what our life was.
Yeah.
And so I do like little things where I like try to show up for my family and prove to them that I'm doing this for you guys and I want to be able to do this for you guys. But it does get a little tricky because you don't want to seem braggadocious. You don't want to seem like you're rubbing it in their face in any way. And I remember my mom, she humbled me real quick, and love her to death. We were on this vacation and we were talking about salary. And at this point, I didn't know how much my mom was making. And I think it's very easy for us to get caught up in numbers and be like, oh, 100,000 isn't that much. I'd rather make 200,000. And I remember I made a comment, and I think I was in the middle of a negotiation for like a new role. And I was like, they only want to pay me 125,000. And my mom was like, girl, 125,000 is a lot of money. And she's like, check your privilege. And I was like, yep, you're right. In a lot of cases, like that's a number I dreamt of as, when I was 15. I would never dream of making $100,000 without a college degree. Are you kidding me? And here I was just being like, oh, it's just 125,000. Like, I want more. And so it is really nice to be able to have those conversations with my family, because it does remind me of where I came from. It reminds me of, not everyone is as fortunate, and it is a privilege. And, while I love talking about money, I need to be a little careful because, where I am in life isn't where other people are. And I always want to be mindful of that. I always want to be respectful of that. And sometimes I get nervous that it comes across a certain way. Like, salary transparency is, you'd never want to seem braggadocious, but I also want to prove to other women, I didn't have to go to college for this. Like, you don't have to have a college degree to make this kind of money. And, like there is a reason why I do it, and it isn't to just brag about a number.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I relate to so much that you're talking about.
Yes.
Like, even with my own family, I will want to share things with my parents. Like, oh, I got this contract, and like, guess how much they're paying me. And like, they have always been really happy and proud. But I also can't lose sight of the fact that I can only do this because of their sacrifices, because of the things that like they did. And like, when they came to the US, they didn't have anything. And like, it's only because of them that I can do what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it's hard to even have that conversation or like remind yourself of that, because it can feel kind of like, I definitely get that. It can feel really tough.
Yes.
I also relate whenever we would go back to India to our family, we had the family suitcase.
Yes.
We're just like putting like Dove soap bars.
Yes,
and
truly. And it's like Christmas for them.
Oh yeah.
And it's things you take for granted here. And so it always is a humbling experience when you're able to give what you make and, give back and all the things. But no, I think money and family can always be a little tricky. But again, finances were something my family always talked about. So it wasn't, I don't necessarily feel like I can't talk to anyone about it. It's just more of like, I want to be mindful of how I approach the topic.
The conversation. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. And also just like, I'm here listening to you. I'm relating so much. I can only imagine how many other people through your TikToks and through you talking about this feel like someone's relating to them. Have you gotten a lot of like messages from people and things along these lines?
Absolutely. It's so funny. The small videos I would post, it would just blow up. Anytime it was about money, it would just blow up. And I was like, oh, I'm not in this alone. I remember one of the first videos I had blow up was, it was actually about me leaving Smile Direct Club. And it was about how my job felt like a toxic relationship. Like, they kept telling me like I was good enough to do the job, but not good enough for the raise. And that left me feeling very empty. It left me feeling very sad. Like, well, I know I'm worth more, but I'm scared to leave. And then, within 2 years, I tripled that salary. And it was because I job hopped, and because I started to like recognize like, oh, I could earn more. Like, I deserve more. And that was like a toxic relationship. So I remember posting a video about that, and it just, so many women could relate to feeling like they're being sold one story and told another, or like being shown another. And I think that made me realize that I wasn't in this alone. Okay, this is good. Like, we can talk about money without it being a weird taboo topic.
Right.
And so I started to like really dive into that. And so that's when my TikTok kind of became like let's talk about finances and normalize the conversation. And another video that absolutely blew up, I was talking about, I think it was titled like reasons why my home buying experience pissed me off. Like it was something that like, again, I work in social. So like my whole thing is like a controversial hook is like key. And in this carousel of images, I just talked about the experience of buying a home as a single woman and how it was not everything I was hoping for. Like, you know, growing up in poverty and getting evicted, I dreamt about having my own home since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And not many people can say that because they never had to. And again, that's a very privileged outlook for sure. But buying a house was my number one dream. And so when I got into buying my first home and started the whole process, it was not what I thought it was going to be. I would show up to, you know, open houses and they would immediately say, "Oh, is your husband joining us? Oh, should we wait for your boyfriend?" And I was like, "Nope, I'm the buyer. Like, it's just me." And I even remember when I went to sign my title paperwork, my boyfriend at the time, he came with me. They immediately greeted him and shook his hand and was like, "Congratulations." And he was like, "It's actually not my house, it's hers." And the way they greeted me versus how they greeted him, suddenly it was like, "Congratulations, sweetheart." I live in Nashville, but so, you know, the thick Southern accent, and it was sweetheart, and it was like, "Oh, well, look at you, like, good for you." And I just remember being so appalled at the whole experience because I grew up with a single mom, and so I'm used to being around badass women who can do these kind of things and buy a house on their own if they wanted to. And I think that whole experience just reminded me how sexist a lot of things can be and how sexist money can be.
Yes.
And, you know, even just thinking about how women couldn't even have credit cards unless their husbands co-signed. And that was in like the 70s, like not that long ago.
Yeah.
And so I think like that still definitely plays into how people approach money now and how they view money now. Like, oh my gosh, she's a woman buying a house on her own. Like I even cracked up when I saw, you know, you're signing more paperwork because that's what happens when you buy a house. And it was like single woman.
I was just going to say that. So I bought my condo 4 years ago, and I remember signing the paperwork. There were 200 pages, and it said, Mega Fernandez, a single unmarried woman on every page.
Yes, yes.
I was like, what is this?
Yes.
What is going on?
It was one of those things where I took it with a grain of salt and was just like, okay, well, I guess this is my experience. And I remember even I had the inspector come. We're doing the final inspection, and the seller's agent walked in, and it's just me and the inspector. And she walks in and she was like, "Oh, I thought the buyer was here. I'll just come back." And the inspector, he was appalled. And at this point, I'm like, I'm used to it.
You're so
like,
used to this. Yeah.
Over the head. Like, doesn't even faze me anymore. And he was like, "Excuse me, this is the buyer." And he was very curt. He was pissed off. Like, it was very clear. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just wasn't expecting you." And she like caught herself as she was talking. And so that obviously was not a good experience at all. But I think and after she left, he was like, "I'm so sorry. Like, that sucks." And I was like, yeah, it's kind of tainted the experience a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still so proud of myself and so happy I got to do this for myself. But it definitely tainted it. And when I did that video about what pissed me off during that whole process, so many people could relate. And if it wasn't about buying a house, it was about getting a car.
Totally.
It was about just women being outshined by a man or being expected to not be able to afford certain things or do things on their own. Yes.
Every time I went to buy an iPhone, I would get so talked down to. I was like, I'm buying an iPhone.
I know.
I remember I went into.
Do you know how to use it?
Yeah. I went in to buy like the latest model. This was like also 4 years ago. I went to buy like the latest model at the time, and I wanted the latest model with like this much store. I knew exactly what I wanted. And the guy was like, "Are you sure you don't want the pink one in last year's model?" I was like, "What?" I was like, this is sexism 101.
I know,
like,
truly.
did you read a book before you said this to me?
Yes.
So yeah, yes, we had a little bit of differing experiences in that, but I think a lot of women can relate in a lot of different ways.
Scenarios.
I mean, but even the single unmarried woman.
Yes.
I was like, Dad, I called my dad up. I was like, I had to read this 200 times.
I think I even took a video of it because it's kind of a badge of honor because it's like, yeah, I'm a single unmarried woman buying my own house.
Yeah.
But then at the other point, it's like, well, why do we have to say it like that? Like, why do we have to call
Right.
it out? But yeah, to your point, I think it's just part of being a woman. Like
Yeah.
at some point you have experienced something along those lines. And I remember even when I went to go, I bought the house and I was like, now I want to get proving
Mm-hmm.
myself and like buying these nice things. I was like, now I want a luxury car.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had my eyes set on an Audi. I showed
Mhm.
up to Audi and they only greeted my boyfriend, didn't greet me. And he was like, oh, well, we're looking for her. And they were like, oh, okay. But continued to talk to him. And I was like, nope, just for this, I'm buying a BMW. And I literally I didn't even want a BMW. But the whole thing of like out of spite to prove that I could afford it, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to give you my money, my hard-earned money, if you're going to treat me like that.
Right.
So then I got a BMW instead, like for no reason. Like it was truly, and I think that's where the poverty PTSD
Mhm.
creeps in, because it was like, oh, someone again underestimated me, didn't think I was capable, and so now I have to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
And did the guy know I went to be no? But in my
In your
head,
head.
he did. Like in
Yeah.
my head, I was proving a point.
Yeah.
When I started sitting in the room with people who looked like me, I wasn't thinking like, oh, how much are we all making?
Mm-hmm.
I was just happy to be there.
Yeah.
I was happy to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And I think the further along I got in my career, I started to realize, no, I belong at this table. Like I deserve to be at this table.
Yeah.
So now let's talk numbers.
Yeah.
And once I got to that place, I think the sky was the limit for me. Suddenly I was asking for more all the time.
Yeah.
And not coming from a place of not being satisfied or feeling content. I mean, that is something that I worry about if I'll ever be able to feel content. But it's just something that I think naturally and very organically happened is I started to understand my worth and what I brought to the table versus just happy to be at the table.
Mm-hmm. What is something that you think younger you would be the most proud of right now?
I still work on healing her. So it's been a journey. And I funny enough, I don't think she would be most proud of how much money I make or how much money we make now. I think she would be most proud of the fact that I got out, if that makes sense. Like I got out of what might have been expected of me. Like, poverty is a cycle
Mm-hmm.
and society is sort of rigged to keep the poor poor. And I think she would be most proud that she got out. And oh God, I'm gonna cry. And that's not part of her story. It'll always be part of her story, but it's not part of her future.
Yeah.
And I think my inner child and my younger self was always scared that this was it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what my life is going to be like for the rest of my life. And being able to be so far from that, I think
Yeah.
that is what she would be most proud of.
Oh,
So it's
that's
not
really beautiful.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily about how much money, but it's also about, I had the strength and the willpower to actually break the cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I was like, I'm not going to cry on this podcast. But money is such an emotional topic.
okay.
I
People
cry
don't know
about money
this.
all the time.
I cry almost every episode, but people don't really see it. I tear up actually every single episode that we've ever done. Money is really emotional. Money is it's just such a big part of our journeys and our lives,
Mm-hmm.
whether we want it to be or not. It just is. And
Absolutely.
so just, yeah, it is an emotional topic.
Yeah, and it's funny because I used to cry about not having enough money, and then now I cry that I have money. And like it's just and I think that is such a privilege, and that's something like I will gladly cry over that. Then
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong, like where I am now, like 5 years ago, I wasn't in this situation. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't able to take a year off and just
Yeah.
explore who I am and like what I'm looking for and find happiness again. Like I had to bust my butt to get there. And, I've been at the lowest of the low. So like not even just my childhood, but even like early 20s, like you didn't make much working on Invisible Children. Like it was an internship. So
Yeah.
you were paying to be there, really.
Right.
And then my jobs after that, it was, when I moved to Nashville, I was selling furniture just to make rent. Another big thing about money is like align yourself with people who respect your financial boundaries, because I've dated guys who I felt like for a long time I had a sign on my forehead that said, "Want a break from life? I'll support you." Because it truly felt like I was the caregiver all the time. I've always been the caregiver, and it wasn't up until like the last couple relationships I've had where I allowed someone else to be the caregiver
Mhm.
and or to like take care of me financially, not necessarily financially, but like, you know what I
I
mean?
get what you
Like it
mean.
was more
Yeah.
it
It
was
was a
fair. It
partnership.
was a partnership.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of came, I think, at the cost of like having to learn the hard way of like what partnership look like. Money now is just like is a topic that it feels like I'm at peace with it. And
Yeah.
I've never felt that before.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. It was so, so, so good to talk to you.
Me
And
too.
I just really know a lot of our listeners will have a lot to take away, whether they relate or whether they're learning something new or whether now they can understand how other people see money or maybe discover how they themselves have seen money. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being so open and so honest.
Oh, absolutely. I think if anything, I just want people to recognize that whether you like it or not, you have a relationship with money. And if you need to heal it, I think that's perfectly fine and take the time to do it because
Yeah,
it does bleed into every aspect of your
totally.
life. And so, yeah.